could join us today. As you just heard, we are recording this meeting for those who are not able to join us live so that we can share it with other members of the delegation who might have conflicts today. And I want to recognize along with my House and Senate colleagues on the line, it looks like we also have some of our friends from across the street at City Hall or City Council members who are joining us today. So thank you so much for sitting in and being a part of this. Before we get everything kicked off, I see that Senator Orrock just entered the waiting room. So I'm going to give it 1 second so we can get her in so she can share her welcome as well. Good afternoon, Senator Orrock. I was just about to kick off the meeting, so I want to make sure that you can hear us and you're plugged in. You're here, but you're muted. Let's see if we can get you unmuted.
Yeah. How's everybody? Good to be with you.
Wonderful. I was just kicking off, recognizing we've got some of our friends here from Atlanta City Council who have joined us, so thanking them for being with us and welcoming everyone on. We are recording for our members who may not be able to join us today, and wanted to give you a chance to welcome everyone as well, Senator.
Well, thank you so much, Representative Holland, and glad we're gathered here again on a Friday, somewhat rainy Friday, not in session at the Capitol, but here to do the will of our constituents and move forward the City of Atlanta delegation business and welcome our guests.
Wonderful, thank you. So we're kicking off our agenda today. We do have a presentation, and then we have some time set aside to talk about a few bills of interest for the City of Atlanta, so we can discuss those afterwards. I want to thank Representative Kim Schofield, who connected us with our speaker today, Hope Wollensack, who's going to be joining us and has a presentation. Hope, I think I saw you join the call and get your co-host right. So it's, let's see, I know we've been having a little bit of trouble keeping her on the line. So I just want to make sure we've got her in. She's dropped and come back a couple of times.
Yeah. And this is a wonderful thing to support. You all are in for an eye-opening presentation.
So Hope, it looks like we've got you and we've got you joined as co-host. Are you connected to us at the meeting?
Yes, I'm so sorry I could not hear you all before. So glad to be with you now though. Terrific, glad to be here.
Thank you so much. I will turn the floor over to you for your presentation. And we hope all the technology works out. Thank you so much for being here.
Absolutely. And so I planned a little bit of like a 10-minute presentation talking about our work and talking about some of the policy changes that we hope are relevant from our pilot program. And then would love to open it up sort of afterwards for just a discussion, if that sounds right to everyone. So I'll just present for a little bit and then we will, well, we can talk about the program. Sharing my screen and presentation in just a second. Right. Terrific. So I'm Hope Wollensack. I'm the Executive Director of the Georgia Resilience and Opportunity Fund, or the GROW Fund. We are a new organization that was actually born out of a task force that convened in 2020, looking into the root causes of economic insecurity. So I was the director of that task force, working with many names that you all probably are familiar with, Councilmember Amir Faroqi, Mayor Shirley Franklin, Dina Kimball, or some of the Dina Kimball, who else? Taifa Smith Butler of GBPI, lots of different folks who co-chaired that task force. From that task force really was born this organization, the GROW Fund, and our flagship program is the In Her Hands program, which is a guaranteed income program. And so a little bit about the roots of the work. Again, it was a 2020 task force of 28 members, mostly community-based organizations, a few sort of Metro Atlanta actors, and then a few national actors were part of that task force process. We convened for about 8 months and really with the charge of looking into the root causes of economic insecurity in the Old Fourth Ward neighborhood. Obviously, Dr. Martin Luther King's legacy and Corretta's legacy in that neighborhood, Ebenezer Baptist Church, Just blocks away is the largest concentration of Section 8 housing in the Southeast on that Boulevard area. And then we certainly know the developments sort of in the neighborhood, both with $1 million newly constructed homes and then Ponce City Market and the expansion of the East Side Trail of the Beltline. So lots of different dynamics in this particular neighborhood, but really thinking about this neighborhood as a lens for examining the trends that are happening across the country, and how maybe this place with a really deep history of racial justice, economic justice could actually help us carve a path forward. So keeping that in mind, that's how we landed on a guaranteed income program in sort of this with this coalition of actors, talking to community members, asking community members, hey, what do you need? What supports are already there? And what would just be helpful to you to get to the next level? And so that's how we landed on a guaranteed income program. And we're super proud of this program called In Her Hands. And we'll get into the title in just a minute and some of the rationale behind aspects of it. I did really want to share briefly, and I know this is probably familiar to lots of folks in the room, but just in case, to go back to the history of a lot of this work, it certainly didn't start with this task force. Dr. Martin Luther King was an early advocate of guaranteed income. He said he was now convinced that the simplest approach will prove to be the most effective. The solution to poverty is to abolish it directly by now widely discussed measure, the guaranteed income. So just after a couple years after the passage of the Voting Rights Act, King really turned his attention to issues of economic justice, because he knew that our civic rights, our democracy was hollow if we didn't also have economic freedoms, economic rights to back that up. Choice is sort of a fallacy if we don't actually have the means, the financial security, the stability that enables choice. And so really when we think about sort of economic security, we think about it's a core tenet. It is the bedrock of choice. It is the bedrock of freedom within our country. But Dr. Martin Luther King was not the first advocate of guaranteed income. FDR was a huge advocate of guaranteed income, although it looked a little bit different when he was advocating for it. But guaranteed income as we know it today was really spearheaded by the National Welfare Rights Organization, spearheaded by this woman, Joni Tillman. This was a multiracial coalition of women, but led by African-American women. Really, King elevated many of their ideas. Of course, important to give credit where credit is due. So our program, the In Her Hands program, is really an ode to one of Dr. Martin Luther King's quotes: "The dignity of the individual will flourish when decisions concerning his life are in his own hands, when he has the assurance that his income is stable and certain, and when he knows that he has the means to seek self-improvement." So our program, we'll get into some of the finer details in just a second, will provide an average of $850 a month for 24 months, with a focus on Black women across Georgia, in particular 3 specific geographies, really with the idea that guaranteed income and additional stability, economic stability and security really does unlock doors and becomes a pathway to so many other opportunities. It's a foundational piece to other opportunities. We often think it as the outcome of certain opportunities, but actually it's a precursor to opportunities. We can talk a little bit about the research on that. So what do we mean by In Her Hands? Cash in the hands of women. So supporting Black women experiencing financial insecurity in Georgia to achieve greater financial stability, overcome wealth decelerators, enable greater choice and agency. And then a second meaning to this is really power in the hands of impacted communities to generate changes that we want to see in our communities. So often policy, especially at a national level, can really feel very top down. And so how can we ensure that actually impacted communities have power in our hands, in their hands, to change certain outcomes and to advocate for solutions that really grasp at the root? We are thinking really about solutions that are not just window dressing, that don't just change things a little bit, but change both policy and paradigm on how we approach poverty. And so we hope that our program is not just a cash transfer program, but is a paradigm shift on what we believe are the root causes of economic insecurity. It's not tons of studies over decades, not primarily the result of individual bad choices, even individual better choices or individual choices and individual opportunities like education, businesses. We know that those still often fall short to close racial and gender, income and wealth gaps. And so we really need solutions that are policy-wide and that are at the scale of the amount of inequity that we see. So we hope that this program will help get us there. What is guaranteed income? There's both a a very technical definition of unconditional cash transfers to members of a particular group with the goal of supplementing, not supplanting the social safety net. But I think at its most basic form, guaranteed income is cash in the hands of those who need it the most, with the goal of providing direct support and greater choice and agency for individuals and families. We already see versions of guaranteed income, from the earned income tax credit, which I'm sure you all are very familiar. And then, of course, the child tax credit is a form of a guaranteed income for families with children. So there are already forms of guaranteed income that exist. Some of them are a bit more restrictive as they currently exist, but our program hopes to be sort of focused on one group, but generally pretty unrestricted. So evidence on cash assistance, in addition to the long history of guaranteed income and sort of its connectivity to issues of economic and racial justice, cash assistance and guaranteed income is a form of cash assistance. EITC, CTC, a form of cash assistance. Cash assistance is one of the most studied anti-poverty interventions globally. Most of the studies are outside of the US, but there are about a dozen or so in the US. There's over 300 studies globally. It's sort of pretty clear that cash improves, especially in the economy that we have today, that cash improves a whole host of outcomes, to the extent that, you know, there's probably even more outcomes in this because it just impacts every aspect of someone's life: health, wellness, employment, midterm financial outcomes, children's health outcomes. There was just a study that you may have seen in the New York Times about children's brain development when moms have more cash in their pockets from a baby's first year program. It was a national program. Well, it was a program across several cities in the country that gave additional financial support to moms, unconditional, and really had profound impacts on babies' development. So while there is much that we know about cash transfers like guaranteed income, and certainly the stimulus checks and CTC, and the expansion of EITC in some places is helping us learn more, there's still a lot that we don't know. In particular, sort of what cash levels are sufficient, what are the best ways that it can be distributed, how can it be distributed equitably and reach communities facing some of the most acute impacts of economic insecurity, and how does it work in different geographies. Guaranteed income conversations to date have been very urban centered. You've probably heard of mayors for a guaranteed income, a program of various mayors across the country launching guaranteed income programs. Super exciting, but that also means that oftentimes a lot of rural communities, you may have rural mayors here and there, but typically rural communities have been left out of this conversation. So our program will have an intentional focus on Southwest Georgia. About a third of our participants will be from Southwest Georgia. So why the focus on Black women in particular? We get this question a lot. The first is really when you look at the data and trends. Black women are among many groups, are incredibly resilient and resourceful, and really know how to stretch a dollar further, turn a dollar into two, very actually financially savvy, and yet there are pervasive misconceptions that is not the case. So the so-called myth of the welfare queen. What we know is that Black women have the highest labor force participation rates of any group of color. Of all groups of women, they have the highest rates of labor force participation rates. But really what is stacked against women, and then Black women in particular, with a compounding sort of racial and gender impact, is it's income barriers. That Black women make 63 cents on the dollar. It's really hard, no matter how much you're working, no matter how many jobs that you have, to really make that work over time. Those effects are not just felt by single individuals, but by family units, communities, loved ones. And so when you look at Black women are one of the most likely groups to experience poverty and to get stuck in poverty, again, because the lower wages make it really hard to get out, even when you are working. Even with educational attainment for all groups of women, actually with educational attainment, the wage gap widens. So when we look at the trends, there's a huge impetus here to start with a group that's feeling some of the most acute impacts of economic insecurity. And really this embraces the Black Women Best framework. So when we invest in Black women, we're really creating frameworks where everyone can benefit. And then, of course, this was a community recommendation. So this was driven by a community task force of 28 organizations. We did a huge survey of the Old Fourth Ward community. We did listening sessions. We did coffees, one-on-ones. It was an organizing piece to this. And really, this is what community members told us where it would make sense to start. And so embracing the idea that communities should have the power in their hands to determine the direction of sort of programs and resources, we felt it was important to focus on Black women. So how will the In Her Hands program work? We are currently funded as philanthropically funded, but we're currently funded to serve 600 Black women across Georgia. We'll be across 3 geographies, a launch site in the Old Fourth Ward, a second site in Southwest Georgia, and then a third site that is currently to be determined, but it'll be a suburban site. And then the program will provide over $20,000 over 24 months. So on average, program participants receive $850 a month. But about half of participants will receive a lump sum upfront of $4,300 and then $700 a month for the remaining 23 months. And this was something we heard not only as an interesting and I think probably important research question of what sort of cash transfers work best, but this was also something community members told us they wanted. So there was one community member in particular that we talked to in the Old Fourth Ward. She would commute every day to her job in College Park. She had to take a ride share or an Uber to get there. She spent about $20 each way to go to a job where she made a little over minimum wage. What she really needed, food stamps, a housing subsidy wasn't going to cut it. Even what she said was like a small increase in her hourly wage still wasn't going to cut it. What she really needed was a pretty moderate investment, a couple $1,000s, as she said, to jumpstart her life. And so really this idea for that program design and that $4,300 up front came from her and came from other community members in that listening session agreeing. They need a couple $1,000s to go back to school, start a business, invest in a better car, first month, last month for a new apartment. And that could really have some compounding amplification impact for the recurring payments over time. So what do we expect to learn from this? It is a pilot program. It'll be 2 years. We are launching in the next couple of months. We'll begin to enroll participants. So we expect to learn things about health, overall wellness, relationships, employment, education, buffers against known wealth decelerators. What we know is that when people come from cash families with lower levels of wealth, that they then become cash strapped themselves. They then are more likely to use predatory financial resources, even when they know they're bad. This isn't like an education problem. People know the payday loans are not the best idea. People know sort of unaccredited colleges are not a good idea. They have very few choices. And that's the problem, that they're sort of forced into this limited set of choices. And they know these aren't they often know these are not the optimal, this is not the optimal decision, but they have very few choices. So really we're looking at how cash is going to enable choice along all of these domains. But we also have a community-based participatory research design. This is led by Leah Hamilton at Appalachian State University in a partnership with NYU and then a partnership with Clark Atlanta as well. And we'll ask community members what they'd like to learn. So we'll have these community town halls. What impacts would they expect to see? Are these just individual level impacts, family level impacts, community level impacts? It's one of the reasons that our program is concentrated in 3 geographies and is not just 600 women from across the state. Really important to us to be community-based and that we can have sort of both these community town halls and be thinking about cash doesn't just impact one person, it impacts a whole host of people within their network, both for the better and if there's shortages of cash shortfalls can also impact whole networks as well. So this is a little bit about the program. I think it's just 2 years when we think about sort of in the long term, what changes we would hope to see. The first is most certainly improving the financial well-being of program participants. But the second is that this program is a drop in the bucket. It's the largest program in the South, the largest guaranteed income program in the South. It's the largest program by far to focus on Black women. It's one of the largest guaranteed income programs ever. But yet we know that 600 women across Georgia is nowhere near sufficient. And so what we'd like to learn is things that would impact policy change. What does this mean for maybe Georgia EITC? What does this mean for a federal CTC that's permanent? What does it mean for maybe a federal guaranteed income? And then finally, what does it mean for sort of driving policy that's really from the ground up and that really values the voices and centers the voices of those who are most impacted by issues? So I think at the heart of this is really how we really invest in communities, invest in individuals, and sort of the freedom and choice associated that with greater economic agency and security. So I will stop there. I think I went a little over, and I'm happy to answer any questions specifically about the program, policy outcomes, how it compares to other programs across the country, how it connects with other policy changes. It's not a magic bullet within itself. Yeah.
Hope, thank you so much. That was helpful. And I've got to admit, a program that I knew almost nothing about before you came here. So thank you for sharing it. I'm hoping I'm not completely alone in that. I know a few folks will have questions. I had one just to start, and forgive me if I missed this during the presentation. But you talked about this is currently privately funded, correct? Privately funded by whom? Is it primarily foundations? Is it corporations? Who's providing the money for this?
Yeah, it's privately funded by a mixture of foundations, individual donors, including sort of lower dollar donors, and then high net worth donors. We have a partnership with an organization called Give Directly. They're the largest cash transfer organization globally. And really their model is, how do they get as much funds as possible to people experiencing poverty? Because it's what we know really changes outcomes, even over services or in-kind resources. So we're very grateful for that partnership, and they're a global actor sort of in this field.
Thank you. That answered my second question, which you talked so much about this being a global effort and not just something that's domestic to the United States. So the funding is also something that winds up being global. There are international partners in addition to US-based partners, right?
All of our partners are US-based.
Okay.
Directly does do work, I guess, globally, but they're US-based, and yeah, and they've run US programs before, including sort of a COVID relief program, and they do a decent number of like emergency cash relief programs as well.
Thank you. I see Senator Orrock has her hand raised.
Thanks, Hope. I was looking forward to hearing from you, because as soon as we scheduled you, I went ahead and wound up on that website that you just described, what's it called? Giving, you muted.
Give Directly.
Give Directly. And so is there any other website for people to see all of what you just shared? If you give us those addresses, those internet addresses, that would be very, very helpful. And you know, it's a program that still is not high profile. Betsy, to your point of just learning about it, it's what stage would you say you're in, Hope?
We did a public announcement. We've gotten some decent coverage. So we've been on MSNBC, ABC, we've been on MSNBC a couple times. NBC, we have a piece coming out. We had an NPR piece yesterday, been on WAB a couple times, and then had we're on a closer look yesterday. So we've gotten some decent coverage. We are in the final stages of fundraising, sort of whether it will be 600 or 650 women in the program. So we're in the final stages of fundraising, and we're preparing to enroll participants and do cash payments starting in the next like 2 to 3 months.
And what's the selection process? And pardon me if I'm asking a question that caused you to have to repeat something you've already said. But
no, absolutely. I should have put it in the presentation. There are really 3 things that people will be, sort of 3 eligibility criteria for the program. The first is that the person live within an eligible geography. Being really community-based is important to us. Also because it enables us to do really targeted outreach to people at the lower end of the income spectrum for our program. So our program eligible participants will go up to about 200% of FPL. That may vary a little bit by program site, but certainly everyone, there are many people who could benefit from a program like this. We want to sort of do our best to reach the people who are always the last to hear about these programs, last to hear about these types of resources. So we'll have a concerted effort to sort of do outreach within specific communities. So the first is that you have to live within an eligible geography. And then the second is that you self-identify as a woman. That's inclusive of all women and non-binary folks. And then the third is that you meet the income threshold for the program. So you have to be in need, and that will be about 200% of FPL. Yeah. So those are the three.
And you anticipate, what's your timeline in terms of having identified the women and cutting the checks?
Yeah, it should be it'll be a staggered rollout. There's a decent amount of this that requires like in-person, both canvassing and then the enrollment event. So it'll be a staggered rollout in the Old Fourth Ward, and then a couple, actually 3 counties, maybe 4 in Southwest Georgia. And then we're working right now to identify our 3rd suburban location. So it'll be about 2 months before the Old Fourth Ward, and then about 1 month after that for each of the following locations.
And are there organizations that you can name in Old Fourth Ward that are engaged at any one of a number of levels with you on this?
Yeah, so some of the people who are on the task force, well, we're fiscally sponsored by the MLK Senior Community Resources Collaborative. And then we work with HDDC as well. And then we are working closely with the Wingate Property Management Company, who runs most of the Section 8 housing on Boulevard. And then we have a couple other, Kindesi School in the Old Fourth Ward, Hope Hill. So we have a couple other sort of organizations that we work with as well as we have a community advisory council of women, women in particular. Maybe there's community advocates really who probably have proximity to a lot of these issues, and they advise heavily on sort of many aspects of the program, from application to how we do outreach to even some aspects of the design of the program.
And I do think it's a very attractive, it's a very tangible, the program is so tangible that it's very attractive to individual donors to say, well, I want to pitch in and add some money to that pot, because they're going to be getting it directly into the household, budgets and revenues for people in need.
Mm-hmm. Yeah, and I think our program runs quite efficiently. So we run at about 85% efficiency. So for every $1 we receive, 85 cents of that goes to the women directly, and that certainly increases as our program grows. We are really intentional around keeping really low overhead costs. One challenge that we do have that I think might be relevant here is that Georgia's thresholds for current public benefit programs are really difficult to navigate. So when people have the 130% level on SNAP, makes it really hard that when people have our cash disbursements under IRS guidelines will be gift income, but for certain benefits, including Section 8 and for SNAP in particular, those are 2 big ones that people will experience. It'll supplant some of their current benefits. And other programs across the country have this challenge, and we can mitigate it a number of different ways. But in Georgia, the thresholds are particularly difficult. So that 130% of FPL, and we've talked to this at length with a lot of the women and sort of would-be program participants, that even as they experience moderate increases in their income, let's say from work, and their wages from work, they sort of, for every 2 steps they take forward, they feel like they're put back a step and a half. So they're talking about they would need $5, $10 increases in their hourly wage, or like many hundreds of dollars a month in order to actually feel more secure, which is certainly something we spend a lot of our time thinking about in terms of program design. And I know is probably something many folks here think about at the state legislature.
So Hope, if I'm hearing that correctly, you're saying that part of the problem is, particularly with Section 8 and SNAP, is that gift income is considered income. So it's pushing people out of eligibility to receive the cash grant from you, even though you're trying to designate it in a way where the IRS wouldn't see it as regular income.
Yes, so
Okay,
it is excluded for tax purposes, but the income calculations for benefit programs are not consistent with the income calculations for tax purposes, which is also another thing when folks are navigating various systems, what counts as a gift and what is considered a gift varies even by program. So we sort of have a safety net where it's very difficult for people do it pretty well actually, and are actually, I think, the experts who are advising us on how to navigate this. And then we're sort of backing it up with additional research, but that it gets really complicated because program by program, what is considered a gift and how exactly it's counted can vary. So to sort of protect any tax benefits or tax subsidies, that's why we've done it under IRS guidelines, sort of under the IRS guidance as a gift. But that does not translate over to SNAP, Section 8, any other housing benefit. Those are the major two, but.
Right, as I understood the problem, it's that a little bit of cash infused into a household income can throw someone out of compliance with their eligibility for this or that public benefit that they're currently receiving based on their low income. Is that another way of putting it, or is that accurate?
That's correct. Whether it's our program or it's like additional wages from working, and that this is a huge stressor for people. Yeah, it's a huge stressor. It comes up. It's one of the top 3 things that come up when you talk to anyone.
Exactly. Yeah, the same thing occurs if you have a partner and you begin living under the same roof. It can vastly disadvantage you in terms of your access to the public benefits, and so it almost stands in the way. This is not new news to anybody. It stands in the way of a family all staying together under one roof.
Mm-hmm.
I'm not talking about your program. I'm talking about the damn ground rules on a lot of these public benefits. Yeah.
That's exactly what we've heard too. Yes. And so our program, a lot of programs across the country may be targeted towards single moms. Those can be great. I don't think there's anything wrong with that. Our program can be married, unmarried. You can have kids, not have kids. We purposely wanted to make it a little bit more open because there are lots of different types of families that need support. And so we want to make sure that our program wasn't putting any of those limitations there. And we hope to learn a little bit that hopefully can influence some of these other policy areas and sort of what people have described, make it a little bit difficult to navigate.
And that comes to, I think, what my last question was, which was going to be sort of what do we need to be mindful of as lawmakers as to how these programs integrate into the greater program. So identifying the difficult and sometimes arbitrary way that we have done some benefit programs is helpful, but is the hope that once you've gone through this program for 2 years, the data you have could also help inform some policy decisions moving forward? Is that conversation with government part of the goal of the program?
Yes, that's exactly it. We really hope to generate and disseminate some findings that feel really policy relevant, whether that's to the EITC conversation. Of course, Georgia is one of 20 states that doesn't have a state EITC. So, to the extent, I think there will be a decent amount of overlap on the power of it. I know there's much research already, and many folks maybe in this room have led some of those conversations. And the next would be like currently our social safety net programs feel really precarious for most families. And so how can we actually have a stronger social safety net that effectively helps people transition and that doesn't feel punitive, restrictive, and in like a high place of surveillance? And so I think in particular, some of Georgia's thresholds make it a little bit more difficult to navigate some of those things. And so maybe there are things that we can do to strengthen the social safety net and make it more accessible and help with a better transition. And then I think the last policy area that we'd be looking at are sort of guaranteed income is not a new concept, but this is a new era. So what are policies that we can bring to the table that are innovative, that are really attacking some of these issues of inequality, growing inequality really for most groups, that can really tackle it at the root? And so I think there are many, continuing this idea of policy generation and innovation, particularly with an eye towards equity and with an eye towards some of the most impacted groups, would be one of our third things. And we know guaranteed income stabilization programs in general are just one solution, often of many, alongside healthcare, education, I think income stabilization has a powerful ripple impact on many of those other domains, including employment and sort of the broad economic future of an area, including a state. But yeah, we know it often is most effective when paired along with other reforms too. So we hope to learn a bit about that.
Wonderful, thank you.
Thank you.
Any other members have questions before we let Hope get back to the good work that she does and we move on to our next agenda item? I appreciate you taking so much time with us today, Hope. This was really, really helpful.
Thank you. Very grateful for the opportunity, and I will drop my email in the chat in case anyone is interested in connecting with me. Again, really appreciate you all and the work that you're leading. Very grateful for this opportunity.
Thank you so, so much. And again, we'll make the recorded version of this available to members as well, so anybody who couldn't join us gets the chance to see it. I think the next thing on our agenda is old business and new business. I had a couple of bills I just wanted to bring up for awareness for the group. And then if others have either local legislation that you're working on or just other bills that you want us to keep an eye on because they could have a disproportionate impact on Atlanta, please feel free to share. I just had, and folks may already be aware of these, but I just like making sure they're out in the ether. There's two Senate bills that got dropped about a week ago, SB 520 and SB 521. They have almost identical sponsors on both. SB 520 is something that would address how an independent school system like Atlanta Public Schools could expand its borders to include educating children from a different municipality. This is pretty obviously a bill that's being introduced to help support the argument for, or help give explanation to how a Buckhead city would be able to expand the footprint of who APS could serve, even if there was a dual municipality. So just know that even though we're celebrating a little bit, that the Lieutenant Governor and the Speaker of the House have said they're not looking to hear that legislation this year. The legislation that would be needed to help support de-annexation is still being filed this year and potentially moving along. SB 521 falls into that category as well. That defines how a de-annexed entity that became a newly incorporated city could manage purchasing property back from the city from which it was annexed. So essentially it's addressing what do you do with fire stations and libraries and other city-owned properties if a portion of that city de-annexes and wants to purchase them from the original city. It also, if I understand correctly, has a provision in it to make sure that water and sewer rates would not change for that de-annexed area. And since one of the big criticisms of Buckhead City was that water rates would automatically go up for those who left the city of Atlanta, this again seems like a bill that was very much designed to start sort of be the Christmas ornaments that go along with the Christmas tree of the Buckhead City bill. So just be aware it's SB 520, which has been assigned to the Finance Committee in the Senate, and then SB 521, which is the de-annexation, fire stations, libraries, et cetera bill that's been assigned to Judiciary. So
and
just,
SB 520 that you just addressed around public education had a hearing.
thank you for that. See, I didn't.
Finance. No vote taken.
Okay, thank you for that. So just for our friends on the Senate side, if you can keep an eye on those, they make me a little bit nervous that they're still moving through because they would lay groundwork. They don't have to be passed in conjunction with the de-annexation bill. They're designed to be standalone bills that would simply address any de-annexed community. But they seem pretty specifically written to answer the Buckhead City questions should it come up in 2023. The only other one that I'm keeping an eye on, it's a bipartisan bill. It may not necessarily be harmful, but I don't like preemption bills, and that's House Bill 1301 has gotten a little bit of media attention lately. It would prohibit municipalities from putting any restrictions around gas leaf blowers that they didn't also put around electric leaf blowers. It's been signed almost entirely by folks who are outside of dense urban communities. The concern I have about this is that if the city of Atlanta decided to pass an ordinance that said gas leaf blowers cannot be used before 10 a.m. on Sunday mornings, this would preempt the city from being able to do that if you were looking at essentially noise management ordinances. So just something to keep an eye on if you are on the committee that's going to see, I think it's government affairs as this goes through the House, or if our friends at the city of Atlanta have concerns about it and want to relay those to us. Like I said, it does have bipartisan sponsorship. So if we need to do some tweaking with the language or need to bring up some things in committee, that would be good for us to know to pass along to our friends on government affairs on the House side. But that's the biggest preemption bill anyway that I've seen coming through.
Betsy, there's a preemption bill that would prohibit localities from, these would hit our city where we're elected to serve, both state people and city council level. But a preemption to disallow a local municipality to have any ordinances on the rental, whether they want to zoning, it would block local zoning powers to identify an area that you have chosen to have owner occupied homes or renter occupied homes. It's again, statewide preemption, bad, taking away local control, bad. And then there's another bill.
I was good on the floor right here too.
Okay, good. Thank you.
Okay. Somebody, yeah, there's another bill that I was just looking for the bill number in the Senate that would do what the Dempsey bill in the House does. And that is, I call them, tent cities for the homeless, but it would, it'd be very damaging to, it criminalizes homelessness. And it would also interrupt the flow of funds that are identified to provide wraparound services for homeless people, formerly homeless or currently homeless people. I think that's 535, but I can't find it while I'm talking to you. But that again, it's a preemption sort of bill that would wreak havoc on the municipalities that are addressing the unhoused and how to house them. That's in the Senate. I'll have that number up before we get off, but.
Thank you for that. I am the worst at being able to keep track of bill numbers, which is why I had to have those on a Post-it when I was talking about them. Representative Misha Manor, I see you have your hand up. Go ahead.
Yes, thank you, Chair. I just wanted to bring light to HB 1004 that Senator Orrock and I have been working on for the AUC complex. And pretty much they are asking for the state to create legislation so all of the campuses, I believe it's a total of 6, can have a united police force. The reason why that's important is each individual campus is not allowed to go into another private campus's jurisdiction to police. And so if there is a crime happening on one campus and another police entity sees the crime, they actually cannot do anything about it. They would have to call 911 and wait for Atlanta police to come. And so this past week, we did have a hearing and Dr. Hodge and Dr. Sewell both came. We have letters from all the presidents of the colleges, as well as from the Atlanta Police Foundation. And it should be held in committee this week. And Chairman Collins over Public Safety and Homeland Security has graciously signed as a second signer to ensure that it gets passed through.
So that bill will you had the hearing this past, well, you had a hearing early this week, right, Representative? And,
right.
And you expect to have it on the calendar next week for a vote in that Public Safety Committee. Is that right?
Yes, and we
Great.
made some changes based on Terry Norris from the Sheriff's Association. I think he said he spoke to you.
Well, yeah. He I don't know what he jumped on and did. I'm not sure it was needed, but some people just can't keep their hands off the bills,
I know. Well, we were able to correct what he wanted. He just wanted to make sure that since it said 500 yards, he was concerned that, 500 yards on MLK would be in the sheriff's territory. And so we just changed some wording. And so that has been, he's appeased now.
Yeah, good to hear. I'm prepared to either carry your bill when it gets over, which it looks like it will, or I put it in over here as well, in case we needed a backstop. But I'm confident that you're going to get that through the House procedure before the 33rd day. It's a very common sense bill.
Yes. So, and thank you for helping me.
Mhm.
Thank you for sharing that, Rep. Maynard. Anyone else on the call have legislation, either you're sponsoring or local ledge or other legislation you just want us to keep an eye on as it may impact City of Atlanta? It's hard to believe we're only just past day 20. It feels like we've been here for a long time, but I know more stuff is still coming down the pipe.
Well, I'll tell you all, there's a preemption bill that passed the Health Committee that says no local subdivision of government, including authorities, school boards, et cetera, are allowed to mandate that their employees have the COVID vaccine. And that passed the Senate Health and Human Services with a mitigated by putting a sunset on it. Yeah, then that sunset comes in after this election this year. What a surprise. But it's another massive overreach, violation of local control. And it was a party line vote in the Senate Health and Human Services. And the person carrying the bill is Chairman of Rules, Senator Mullis, same person that's carrying those Buckhead preemption bills.
And then the removal of the mask mandates for sort of the prohibition for local schools to require masks. Is that also going through Health and Human Services on the Senate side? I hadn't seen where that would have been.
No, that's likely in K through 12, but
Okay,
don't hold me to that because I'm not on that.
There's a lot flying at us. So but the vaccine one reminded me that we also have to keep an eye out on the mask one, which also I think has a sunset in 2023. But the concern is obviously that we're not out of COVID right now, and that we could have extraordinarily contagious strains pop up before then, and we would have tied the hands of our school boards to try to keep their children safe.
The budget's also traveling through, of course, and Senator Davenport, who's on the call with me, we're striving to get Morehouse, the School of Medicine, some more funds to train in healthcare providers for rural areas, have a nursing program at that medical school, et cetera. So that's something that's it's in the budget, but it certainly would be a plus for Atlanta, for our flagship school like the Morehouse Medical that's known statewide for getting rural practitioners trained and committed to staying in rural areas, underserved rural areas.
And I'm correct that line item is there. We're just fighting for more money to be allotted to the program. Is that right? That's
right. Well, yeah, they would be expanding their capacity to train nurses.
Got it. I know we're almost at time. Anyone else? Legislation or other business to bring forth for the delegation? I guess this is new business now. Any new business to bring forth for the delegation? Hearing none. Senator Orrock, do you want to close us out?
Well, we had a wonderful opportunity to hear about this guaranteed income program, this pilot that's been launched. And I certainly know very well part of town that they've targeted in Senate District 36, the old Fourth Ward, and then the high needs there for families. So we'll look forward to staying apprised of that, and appreciate the Representative Schofield for bringing that to the caucus agenda. And again, thanks to those who joined us from City Council. We look forward to working arm in arm on the pressing matters facing our city, and encourage you to have this on your calendar on an ongoing basis, Fulton County and City of Atlanta alternating weeks and sometimes coming together for Friday meetings. And this will step up as the bills, the pace of the bills moves ahead. And for those that are not in the legislature here, just a reminder to you, all the bills have to cross from one chamber to the other by crossover day. And that day this year is March 15th. So we are on the treadmill working to get our bills across. And they're not eligible for passage this year if they don't move to the other chamber by that crossover day. I don't have anything else to add, Chairman Holland.
So that was a good reminder of housekeeping. So our next scheduled meeting, if we don't have reason to call one before then, is for Friday, March 11th. Given the proximity of March 11th to March 15th, I bet we'll have lots to talk about in that meeting. Same time, 12 o'clock on Friday. This same Zoom link will work for all of the delegation meetings for the Atlanta delegation for the rest of this session. So for those who, if you're not on that email distribution or you just need to put it in your calendar, it'll be March 11th. At noon, same Zoom link, but we will send out a reminder to the distribution list that week. But with that, thank you everyone for joining us. I think Hope has dropped off, but thank you, Rep. Schofield, for having Hope join us. That was incredibly enlightening. And thank you to my co-chair, Senator Orrock.
Thank you. And people know that they can get on the distribution list by contacting.
They can contact me, actually, if you want to just send an email to my ledge address, betsy.holland@house.ga.gov. We'll make sure to get folks added to that distribution. And we do record the meetings for our members, but if anyone needs those recordings afterwards, let us know. We'll make sure to get that link out to everyone as well.
Thanks, everybody. Have a good weekend.
Thank you, everyone.
Have a good weekend, everybody.
Thanks.